class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we'll be discussing the game between the Sharks and the Devils, in which the Sharks managed to win 3-2 in overtime. So after a pretty disastrous road trip that saw them go through New Jersey, both of the New York teams, as well as the Philadelphia Flyers, and go 0-4, the Sharks come back home. They have a rematch against this Devils team, and they actually managed to take them out, even if it did take a few extra, I guess technically seconds, considering how early the Sharks scored into this overtime. And they get the 2 points that are pretty inconsequential at this point, but still nice to see a Sharks victory for the first time in, a week and a half or so. And this game started off pretty poorly. It looked like it might end up just be adding to the losing streak, as the Devils would go up 2-0 in the first period with goals from Zajac and Gusev. And in fact, it wasn't just a pretty offensively inept period for the Sharks, which has become a bit of the norm in the past few games, but it was also quite poor defensively in that first period, which is something that was pretty weird for the Sharks, considering that they have been playing decently solid defensive hockey in the past few games, you could say. And so on this Gusev goal especially, the Sharks just get completely mixed up in the defensive zone. Ends up being a Jacob Middleton turnover that leads to Gusev being all alone in front of the net. And the Zajac one, also some pretty poor defensive coverage, as well as just a big mistake by Vlasic, sort of a blunder, not so much a mistake, as he ends up pushing this puck into his own net instead of being able to clear it from the goal line. I guess there was some pressure, but not as much pressure as you would expect. LeBanc is making a very, very nice defensive play, being able to tie up the stick of Zajac at the side of the net that really gives Vlasic the opportunity to clear it out, but doesn't end up being able to do so. But as we came to the second period, the Sharks really began to pick up the pace. They got goals from Ferraro as well as Sorenson shorthanded to make it 2-2 going into the third period. And while there would be no scoring in the third period, we would get our first overtime in a long time, actually, for the Sharks. It was almost a couple of months ago until the last Sharks overtime, and that was one that I'm sure most Sharks fans would have liked to forget. That was the game against the Washington Capitals, where the Sharks had that late 2-goal lead get just completely decimated by the Capitals, who would end up winning in overtime 5-4. So we get this new overtime, and as I said, just a few seconds into the game, the Sharks end up getting the goal from Couture, the game winner there in just his second game back from injury. And also what was interesting to see in this game is that we got to see that new thing from the Sharks where the players get to pick their own goal song. Sorenson and Couture, obviously we hadn't heard. Sorenson has been scoreless for a long time, and Couture was of course injured. And some pretty interesting song choices, to say the least, for these two players. As the first thing to talk about now would be Martin Jones, as he ended up getting the game here tonight as expected. Pretty solid game, I'd say, from Jones. You could say that the 5-hole goal wasn't great on Nikita Gusev's chance, but he's all alone in front, and even if the 5-hole isn't open, I feel like Gusev will then find a different opportunity. He's a very creative player, so hard to put too much blame on Jones in that situation. And on the Zajac one, he actually makes a very nice save on Miles Wood that eventually leads to this puck ending up on the goal line. So not amazing from Jones, but still, from that point on, after those two goals, however, the second period, the third period, the Devils didn't get too many great chances. Jones made the saves he needed to make, so I'd be pretty surprised if Jones doesn't get the next start on Saturday. But then again, Bob Brunner has been alternating the goalies, so it also wouldn't surprise me too much if Dell also got the next game. Next, I'll talk about Bergman, who ended up coming back into the lineup for also the first time in a while. He was a very interesting player to me because there weren't a lot of rookies besides, I guess, Ferraro, who impressed me a lot in the rookie tournament as well as the preseason for the San Jose Sharks, which was quite disappointing. But Bergman was one who somewhat stood out, and it seemed like he was setting himself up to be a potential mainstay on the fourth line this season. And while he got a few chances under DeBoer, it never really stuck. He was then put into the minors, and he wasn't called up for. He was called up a couple times, but he didn't really get many games for a while until he finally comes back here for tonight's game. And, well, he wasn't really given much of an opportunity to do much. He had, I feel like, his first or maybe his second shift, which was actually pretty solid, but he only ended up actually getting 5 minutes of ice time tonight. Now, maybe there was some sort of injury, but I'm pretty sure there was not. And I was actually somewhat disappointed by this, just because the Sharks don't have much to play for on the season. It's not like they desperately needed these 2 points to keep themselves in a playoff race that they're, more than a dozen points out of at this point. And so I would have liked to see Bergman give a bit more of an opportunity, since the main thing the Sharks are looking at in these past 18 or so games that they do have is to see how their younger players perform, how Bergman does, how Gregor does, how True does, Shellman, and all of them. because they're mostly auditioning to see if they can be potential forwards for the Sharks next season, which is the Sharks season where they're going to try and once again compete, most likely. And so giving Bergman just 5 minutes to audition himself, I feel like was kind of not a great choice. I would have liked to see at least like 8 or so minutes, so a few more minutes there, but in the end, I guess it doesn't particularly matter all that much, but whatever. Next, I'll talk about Gregor, as he ended up getting an opportunity on the first line with Kane and Couture because he scored a goal the other night against the Philadelphia Flyers, and it was pretty obvious that his skill can't keep up with the likes of Kane and Couture, but he wasn't weighing this line down too much. He wasn't necessarily a huge burden. Gregor is a pretty hard-working player, certainly. He kind of reminds me of Goodrow, but worse. And so he was a decent fit on the first line. And as I said, you're auditioning these younger players, so just trying someone like Gregor into a top 6 role to see how he fares in that situation is not a terrible choice. And I don't know why Booner decides to do that with Gregor, but then just leaves Bergman with 5 minutes of ice time. But whatever. I assume Gregor could potentially be given another chance. As I said, he did decently well in that first line spot, but it's also possible that someone else is given this opportunity next game. And finally, I'll talk about Sorenson. As I said, Sorenson, a player who hasn't scored in a very long time. I think it was over 20 games at that point. And so it was nice to see him finally get back onto the scoreboard. You could tell that it gave him a lot of confidence because after he scored that shorthanded goal, his third period was actually quite good, something we haven't seen from Sorenson in a long time. And now Sorenson last season was a player who, while he wasn't necessarily lighting up the scoreboard, he was always a player who you could expect a good effort from night in, night out, especially when he was playing with Joe Thornton. Those two had very good chemistry last season. And so, as I said, he was a 30, maybe 40-point player last season, but it looked, just based on the eye test, it looked like he could be so much more. But this season, it looks like he's basically right where you would expect him to be at the dozen or so points that he does have, because Sorenson, it seems, more or less been invisible in a lot of the games he's played. So hopefully this goal will reinvigorate him somewhat. It looked like it did in that third period, but hopefully it can actually carry over to the next few games and for the rest of the season, because Sorenson is also one of those younger players who you never know, could potentially lose a spot to one of these rookies for the Sharks, because Sorenson certainly doesn't have a mainstay spot on this team, right? If he ends up finishing the year with less than 20 points, what kind of case are you going to really make to be someone who should be playing necessarily into that bottom 6 next season? So Sorenson certainly still has something to prove for himself, but that will do it for this review. The Sharks will be back in action on Saturday. They'll face off against the Pittsburgh Penguins, a team who the Sharks have faced once before this season and actually managed to defeat them 3-2 in overtime. Penguins obviously a very, very good team. They're definitely going to make it to the playoffs, and they're going to look to win another Stanley Cup, their third in 5 years, and we'll see if the Sharks can actually sweep the season series against them 2-0. Class dismissed.